Welcome to another episode of Two Old Geeks Talking. Now on the World Wide Web.
Hey, welcome back to Two Old Geeks Talking. I'm Rob.
And I am Trace.
And today we're talking about
ElfQuest.
Right.
So I'm a fan of ElfQuest. You're a fan of ElfQuest?
I'm a big fan of ElfQuest.
So whether you're into comic books or not,
Fantasy.
ElfQuest, fantasy or not, ElfQuest, number one, starts out as a fantastic love story.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And so it could be a movie in itself, just how the creators met. So ElfQuest, originally, he asked me before we started, why do you have a Silver Surfer comic up there?
Right, yeah.
You want to hold it up there?
Sure.
So ElfQuest actually started in Silver Surfer number 5.
You're shitting me.
No, but this is how it started. In the letters page, okay? So in the back of all comics, there's a letters page where you can write into the editor. And so years ago, because Silver Surfer number 5 it's been a wee bit.
Yeah. Wow.
So a young girl named Wendi Fletcher wrote in and commented on the first few Silver Surfers. And so she was talking about, and it was very long letter, and it was very articulate. And she talked about how they were being hard on the Silver Surfer character. It seemed like he just had one loss after another.
Right.
And of course, that was one way that Marvel Comics built drama, as they put real-world problems in with their characters.
Right.
And so they were flawed and imperfect, and it made them the unbelievable somewhat believable. So she wrote in, they were just punishing this character one issue after another. And she's like, that's cool, but basically what she said was, you kind of need to let up a little bit. Well, that was back in the day where they would print your entire address into the letters column. So, as you know, and I know, there are not many geeky girls in the world.
Right.
So, and especially back during this time. And so all these geeky boys that were reading Silver Surfer and were crazy Marvel fans, they saw this young lady who wrote this really nice worded letter where she was reading comics.
Right.
And had her address. So she started getting tons of mail. And from men or young boys or young men all across the United States interested in her and wanting to know more. So Richard Pini was another one that wrote.
Oh, okay.
And so when he wrote in, he just basically said that he liked her letter and that he told a little bit about himself and asked some questions about her and said, if you want to know more about me, you're going to have to write me back. And that intrigued Wendi. And so and women love intrigue. And so she started writing back, and they became pen pals.
Cool.
So Wendi was I would call it a unicorn. You don't come across too many geeky females, and and if you are a geeky male, that would be something that you would desire.
Sure. Yeah.
So they continued back and forth in writing, and eventually met and fell in love, and they ended up getting married.
Nice.
And they would go to Comic Cons, here, there, and everywhere. And back in the day, I'm going to stop trying to set it up neat. Back in the day, Comic Cons were small affairs.
Right.
Because geekdom hadn't really taken off the way it is now. I would even say it's peaked out and it's on its way down. But certainly during that time, they were small affairs. So you could walk into a Comic Con and walked up to Jack Kirby, which Wendi was really impressed with Jack Kirby and was friends with Jack Kirby.
I think she even learned some of her art skills from Jack.
Yeah, and so you could set up an easel. Sometimes she would set up an easel and just sit outside and draw, and people would gather around because there wasn't a whole lot of geek culture, and there wasn't a whole lot of geek fans, and so these were real private and personal events, Comic-Cons. They wasn't the massive money makers, and Hollywood wasn't involved at the time. So their relationship really took off, and they were close, and And Wendi had a dream that at some point she wanted to make this story about elves, and she'd been drawing elves since she was a little girl. And her real dream was to see an animated movie because she was real big into animation, and she was influenced by Japanese animation,
Right.
and which is super popular now, but which wasn't popular then. And so she's got drawings of elves she'd done when she was like 3, 4 years old, and so when she was just tiny, and so she incorporated that into what we would call American manga today. She incorporated the Japanese style of drawing into her drawing, and was really a pioneer when it came to introducing manga style or anime style art to America.
Except it didn't run ass backwards.
Right. And so they were just going to cons at this time, and so they had costume, or they didn't call it cosplay at the time. They call it costuming or masquerade. And so they Frank Thorne, who was writing Red Sonja at the time, at one of the Comic Cons, they were going to have a Red Sonja look-alike contest. So Wendi made her own costume. She designed it all out, made it out of metal.
Wow.
And she's got red hair, and she's a very attractive woman. And so she went to these Comic Cons. So the geeks were just like,
Foaming at
it was
the
like,
mouth.
yeah, throwing gasoline on a fire. So to say that she was popular, yeah, that would be an
I've
understatement.
seen those pictures you posted on Facebook. I did not know that was her.
Yeah. So my challenge on the Facebook post was that Dynamite always has like cosplay covers.
Right.
And you can't have, with cosplay covers of Red Sonja, because they own the rights to Red Sonja now. They really need to get one of those old pictures of Wendi, because she's in her 70s now. And you can use AI to really digitally upgrade them, and then
Nice. Colorize
make
it.
a variant cover, because I mean she wasn't the first cosplayer or costumer,
Right.
but certainly she was a pioneer, because there wasn't a lot of women doing it at that time, and certainly not a lot of women doing Red Sonja. Well, Frank Thorne, who wrote, or I mean who also drew Red Sonja, he had her introduce her to Roy Thomas, and she helped write like one of the issues, and he would go around these Comic Cons and he would do this little skit where he would dress up like a wizard. He was a very eccentric personality. And then Wendi would get up in her Red Sonja, and she would go through some dialogue, and there's actually a YouTube video of it.
Wow.
And it's actually really entertaining, especially for that time of year and at that time in that era in geekdom back in the 70s. So they had put little feelers out to try to make an animated movie about elves, and things wasn't, they didn't know what they were doing. Richard and Wendi didn't know what they were doing, and so the next best thing, they thought, well, we'll try a comic. And so she started drawing a comic, and they reached out to Marvel, and they looked at it and was like, no, we're not interested. Reached out to DC, they looked at it, no, we're not interested. And at the time, that was about the only two choices you had, back in that era. So they was finally able to get ElfQuest published, and the very first ElfQuest that was published was in Fantasy Quarterly, issue number 1, and it was put up by IPS, and I think that was a publishing company. And so they put it out, and it was a win-win. I mean, it was a mixed bag. So first of all, what happened was she wasn't satisfied with the colors. As you can see, these colors are really jacked up here.
Let me see that.
It may be okay for you.
So it was the coloring that was the. Oh yeah, I can see.
So it's a black and white comic. The cover was color, and she wasn't satisfied with the coloring. Also, the cover, typically covers are thicker stock and glossy. This is newspaper material.
Oh,
the
seriously?
cover is made out of the same material as the pages.
Wow.
Also, they didn't pay them. They were supposed to pay them, so they printed their comic and they released their comic, and the comic did well. It sold like 10,000 copies, which is small for a modern comic, but at the time, an independent comic, in the first issue, that's successful. They stiffed him for the money, and so Richard, being the man that he is, he traveled all the way down to where the publishing company was, sat outside the office, got there early in the morning until they started showing up for work, and he wanted some kind of compensation.
Yeah.
So he wasn't able to get money out of him, but he was able to get Wendy's artwork back. So all the pages that she had sent in, he was able to get it back. So anybody else would have just given up. We tried the animation, that didn't work out. We tried getting it published, and that was a total disaster. We're at this effort, this time, no money whatsoever have we received. So we tried, we failed, and that's it. But like I've said before, they have a huge amount of determination. So they decided, okay, Marvel doesn't want it, DC doesn't want it. We couldn't go through another publisher. We'll just publish it ourselves. So not knowing anything about publishing, they created Warp Graphics, which Warp, W-A-R-P, is an acronym for Wendi and Richard Pini.
Oh, okay.
And so they started creating their own comic. And so, they were doing everything and learning everything the hard way and making every mistake you can make, and that's how you learn.
Right, exactly.
And so they were able to crank out 2-3 issues a year. And the issues were fairly popular. And they couldn't afford advertisement, and so the only advertisement was word of mouth. But word of mouth started getting out. And really, they were one of the first pioneers in independent comic publishing. This is before Image Comics, obviously, but this was also before Usagi Yojimbo or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So they were just like a mom and pop publishing company that come out with this Elf comic. And so their fan base started to grow, and so they decided to try to do trade paperbacks. They had a company that wanted to take their stories and color them, add color to them, and print them and put them in bookstores. Now when you go into a bookstore, you can't imagine going to a bookstore and not seeing a graphic novel.
Right.
Manga is really popular right now. But at the time, there was nothing like that in bookstores. And so that was our first experience with ElfQuest, was the graphic novels. Would you want to show those?
Sure. Now, I have been packing these around for 40-some years. So this is the first one.
And our mom was huge fans of those.
Right. And I think that's why we ended up with the whole collection, was because
we didn't have any money.
Yeah, we didn't have the money. So I think the first one dates back to 81.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see who published those. Starblaze editions. I'm not even sure who published those. I guess it was, Starblaze editions is who published.
Now, here's the crazy thing.
But the artwork.
This is my introduction. So that was one of the things that I brought up on our Instagram page, was how the artwork. So to prepare for this show, I reread the first one. I come across where they had redone it.
Yeah.
Like some of the artwork has changed.
Yeah.
Some of the narration has changed. Yeah. They've added and subtracted. And I wasn't upset about it. It's kind of like, here's the way I looked at it. So, when Shakespeare first put out a play, it wasn't what we know now, because as the years time went by and they continued with the play, they would change it to make it better.
Yeah.
And the same thing with like Mozart's symphony. As the years went by, he would tweak it until what we know now. So this is what I grew up with. But what's out there now is still true to this.
Right.
But there's so much more to it. And I didn't know that they went past this. This is sad. I'm sorry, Wendi. I'm sorry, Richard. I didn't know that you all had gone past this.
Don't feel bad about that, because a lot of fans of ElfQuest that were fans of ElfQuest when we were young didn't realize it continued on.
Yeah, when I started studying into it, there's they've done so many more books.
Yeah, and I,
which makes me happy, because now I've got something to look.
Yeah, and I have read them, and they're very, very good. And really, they were pioneers in trade paperback. They wasn't the first trade paperback. I think that was I forget I forget who did the first. Will Eisner, I think, did the first paperback. I can't remember, but trade paperback. And so, collecting a series of comics into a book size in book form, they call them graphic novels or trade paperback. And so not only was Wendi and Richard pioneers in independent publishing, they were pioneers in trade paperback, and Wendi was a pioneer in cosplay. So after all those years and all that struggle and completing what this is called, these books represent what's called the first quest.
Right.
Or the main quest sometimes. So, but if you'll reach behind me, Rob, and hand me that, yeah. So, after these books, Wendi and Richard got some sweet, sweet revenge. Marvel contacted them, and Marvel wanted to print the series in their new Epic line. So, Epic was
so I thought this was the same as this?
Yes, in a way, and I'll talk about that shortly. But so it's the same story. But so what happened was DC had Vertigo, and the Vertigo line was it was your odd comic book stories. So in other words, it didn't fit into superheroes. It wasn't Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. So DC had the Vertigo line, which I really liked. It's probably my favorite DC comics would be the Vertigo line, and so. Marvel being Marvel, they wanted to copy what DC was doing, so they wanted to come out with their own line that was kind of separate from the superhero Spider-Man and Captain America and the Hulk. Right. And so they came out with Epic. And so one of the things they wanted for Epic was Wendi and Richards. I collected these, even though we had those, and because she did new covers for them. So she did new covers for each issue. And then you know how sometimes you open a comic and it says previously in the last episode. Right. So she would do like a page telling you what had happened so far. That way, if you picked up issue 20 and you hadn't read the others, you kind of got an idea of what was going on. You didn't have to have them all. But I read these, and I'm a huge fan of Wendi's art. So having these and having new covers and having new interior art.
So is this when some of the dialogue and stuff changed or were added?
Marvel didn't change anything. The only thing that was different was they added. They added those pages, but Marvel printed and told the story as is. There's some controversial scenes where the elves are all naked and in a big pile. But Marvel kept it in. Now, I like these because of the paper quality and the color quality. These are printed on newspaper print.
I mean, for this to be 40-some years old, you see what kind of condition.
Yeah, but I mean, for these, I really, really enjoyed them because it was new Wendi art and it was new story. And Wendi and Richard, you want to stick it back, Wendi and Richard would go on these long road trips and they would write stories. So after the Marvel run, they continued the comic. So Marvel did the main quest, what these books had, and they ended. So Wendi and Richard continued the story underneath Warp Graphics with the help of Apple Comics. And they had the first, what you would call limited series, a Siege at Blue Mountain. Now these were a little larger than a regular comic book. And they had a little more content than a regular comic book. They went back to black and white, color covers, but black and white inside, just like the original ElfQuest. And to be honest with you, Wendi's art style and Richard and Wendi's story writing was peaking out during this time. So in other words, I think these, story-wise, was better than these. We love these, but the story, their skill level just continued increasing.
Nice.
So if you haven't read those, and I have them, I'd be glad to lend them to you. They're fantastic reads. So they did, and you notice how the ElfQuest logo always changes constantly. They never had a constant. So after ElfQuest, Siege of Blue Mountain, they come out with another limited series, which was ElfQuest, The Kings of the Broken Wheel. And there again, fantastic story, continues the story on, and black and white comic as well. And like I said, art style continuing to improve, writing continuing to improve. So during this time, she still had her dream of trying to get ElfQuest to be an animated movie.
Okay.
And so There was one company that come along and said we're going to animate the first few issues of ElfQuest. They took everybody's money and never sent out a product.
Oh.
And so
They got no luck with people.
yeah. Also during this time, when they decided, they were only coming out right about the time ElfQuest Hidden Years came out. She decided to try to do full color. So she'd always done black and white. So now she's going to draw it and she's going to color it.
She's coloring
it
it
had a very
herself.
watercolor style, as you can tell by the cover, but they were fantastic. So not only is she good at
That is pretty damn
Now
good.
is she good at art, but at the pencil
Actually,
line.
I like this better than some of the other stuff.
Yeah, not only is she good at penciling and lining and inking, but she's also good at color as well. And but right about this time, Ed Pressman, who was responsible for bringing The Crow to live action, his 8-year-old son was really huge into ElfQuest. And he wanted his daddy to make an ElfQuest movie. So Mr. Pressman approached Wendi, and they started working toward that goal. Also, at the same time, Richard and Wendi, they had put so much time into ElfQuest, but they were only putting out like 3 issues a year because they're doing everything. So they hired a staff. And so they handpicked some artists and writers, and they instead of having just one title, they had ElfQuest Hidden Years, ElfQuest Shards. Those are the 2 that you want to read. And then they also went on to Rebels and Jinx and Wave Dancers, and they started taking it. And to be honest with you, the quality suffered. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. It's like something magical happened when Wendi and Richard met, and something magical happened when they started collaborating on that comic. But when they handed it off to other writers and they handed it off to other artists, it's like a cover band. So something magical happened when Ringo and
they couldn't recreate the magic.
Right. Yeah, when something happened when those 4 men created the Beatles. Something magical happened, but the best Beatles cover band is still just a Beatles cover band.
Right.
So the quality really decreased, but the workload. They were putting out tons and tons of material each month. They were in the comic book shops. A lot of people enjoyed those stories. Me personally, I didn't. But Wendi and Richard. Wendi was pretty much just writing and not doing the art on ElfQuest Shards, because Wendi had went and followed this Ed Pressman to try to get this movie made. And so, if you want to show them that.
Yeah, I'm looking to see the other names on here. I'm not
the other
gonna call
art.
you out.
but as you can tell by that cover,
that's what I was saying.
Yeah, the art's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. And you take an artist like Stan Sakai and Usagi Yojimbo, he's written and drawn all of those. When you're accustomed to Wendi drawing, and then all of a sudden you go to somebody else, I'm not saying they're bad artists. I'm not saying they're...
And this is years and years
Years
after,
later, yeah, years.
Because now Cutter has a beard much like his father did.
Yeah, he's got the long chops and stuff.
Right.
So, so Wendi followed Ed Pressman, and she's writing, and so her and Richard separated. And to be honest with her...
What?
No, not separated, like divorced, but they were having issues in their marriage.
Oh, okay.
And anytime you shouldn't work with family. We shouldn't be doing this show together. No, you should.
That's why we have this.
Yeah, it helps. It helps. But they were having issues. There's a reason a lot of companies have nepotism rules, because when you hire family or you work with family, you're adding emotions into the mix, which typically coworkers don't have emotions toward each other. Also, you take liberties with family that you wouldn't with other people. So in other words, like I would probably say or do things around you that I wouldn't say or do something around somebody I wasn't as familiar with, because you're my brother and I've known you for...
That's true, but I want you to be open and honest with me.
Right, but what I'm saying is I understand the reason why family and business doesn't always go together.
And it's hard to leave that at the office and come
Absolutely,
home. True.
especially when you're doing all of this
Right.
by yourself. So by hiring on the other staff, which was a necessity, and Wendi leaving, she was separated in distance from Richard, and so they started doing pen pal things again. Whereas before they wrote letters, back in Silver Surfer 5, now they were doing emails. And so they rekindled their love while she was away. And so they touched base with what got them together in the first place, which is a nice little love story. So she finally at some point realized that Pressman was wanting to change so much. At one point, it wasn't going to be, it wasn't going to be animated. It was going to be kids dressed as elves riding dogs that looked like wolves, and he was wanting to do something more along the lines of Muppet Babies than he was wanting to do some kind of serious fantasy. And so she was just like, okay, that's it. I'm out. And so she come home, and she come to the realization that, this may happen, and it might not happen. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so she come to that, and a lot of the stress and a lot of the pressure was gone off her and Richard, and they continued on. And so they signed on, just like they had their sweet moment with Marvel, they signed on with DC. They had a limited series with DC. They come out with this standalone book that DC put out with, and they started getting tied in with Warner Brothers. Well, Warner Brothers wanted to make an ElfQuest movie. Warner Brothers, you ever heard of them?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan.
So, Warner Brothers, and a lot of people give them grief over that because that book was originally $25, and they said, that was expensive to get that short of a story.
And what year was that?
And several years ago. So, but they got
$25 now is different than $25.
Right. There's a lot more money then, but they were creating. Wendi was back to drawing, and Richard and them was back to collaborating on the story. But
2004.
So they were going forward 20 years ago. So they were going forward with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers has stipulation. We want to option your ElfQuest for a movie, but we don't want you coming out with no new material while we have this option open. Why? I have no idea.
They're pigeonholing them.
Well, I guess.
They probably wanted to try to get the rights.
I wouldn't doubt it. So you know what Richard did?
He didn't give him the high hard one?
No. He went and he scanned every copy while they couldn't make new ElfQuest. He scanned every copy of every issue and put it on the internet for free because digital comics were starting to take off. You can go to ElfQuest.com today.
Yep, I've been there quite a few
times. Read every one of these books, all the way up to this one. You can read every one of the books, and every page is there, and you can read them for free. No subscription cost or anything. Because he wanted to keep ElfQuest on people's mind during this time. And that was his way of doing it. And that was pretty ingenious. Also, they took every bit of her original artwork. Now, original artwork sells for tons of money. Took every bit of the original artwork and donated it to Columbia University Art Center.
Wow. So
they have every one of her original drawings. Now, we're talking probably at least $1 million worth of artwork that if you'd sold it, you could have got. And Wendi and Richard aren't rich by any means. They've made a living doing what they enjoy, but they've worked hard and they deserve every penny, but they're not rich, and I'm sure they could use $1 million like you and I could.
Right.
But anyway, so they gave the artwork away. So they're keeping ElfQuest relative. So the Warner Brothers doesn't make the movie. Okay? So now they can make ElfQuest comics again. And so Dark Horse reaches out to them.
How long did they have to wait? I mean, how long?
I'm thinking it's a 4-year period.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So Dark Horse started out as a small company and another option besides Marvel and DC. And Dark Horse was originally black and white. They were a little independent company, and they've certainly grown since then. But they reached out to Wendi and Richard and said, hey, do you have any more stories to tell? And it was like, actually, we have the last story to tell, you know. And we had written that years and years ago, and we're ready to tell the last story. So they come out with the final quest. And so they wrapped up, and I won't ruin it for anybody, but they wrapped up the whole story of ElfQuest. Now, the last panel is very similar to the first panel. And so it really bookends the series good. Plus, not only that, it was released 40 years to the day of when the first issue came out. So that booked in the series nice too. They went on to do another miniseries for Dark Horse, following one of the characters that survived, because every character didn't survive.
Oh, is that the Sky?
Skywise.
Skywise.
Yeah. So they come out with a limited series of that. Whether they'll make any more, possibly. But
now, they had children?
You talking about the elves?
Yeah, Cutter and.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I mean,
are they? I'm asking for spoilers, bro.
No. Reach back and grab what the monkeys hold. Hit monkey. Hey, hit monkey.
What's up, bro?
But yeah. They had Ember was their daughter, and they tried to continue. That's the first issue. Wendi didn't write it. Wendi didn't draw it, and I tried it out just because I'm willing to give anything a chance. I think I tried that one out and one more before I bailed. And so, but yeah, you'll be lucky if you get him to hold it again. Oh, you're so good. But
me and the monkey go back.
So currently, as far as ElfQuest goes, Fox Studios, who made, what's that Spider-Man movie you like so much? The animated Spider-Man.
Oh, Into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, Into the Spider-Verse. You're crazy over that. Ronan's crazy into that. And so the same people that made that have optioned to make a series.
But now you got me scared, because it seems like they've been offered so many Trojan horses throughout the years. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I mean, how gun-shy do you got to be at this point?
Well, here's my thoughts on that. So Fox is doing it. Fox is interested. They've asked for an hour-long pilot. And so this company's making it. The company certainly's got the chops. They can do it.
Well, so,
I'm worried about it. And here's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about it being done. I'm worried about it being done correctly. And I said the same thing if you go all the way back to our Usagi Yojimbo video. And Netflix had gotten the right to Usagi Yojimbo.
right.
And so they come out with the Usagi Yojimbo series, and they changed everything about Usagi Yojimbo other than his name. And so it got canceled after one season. And it was not very good. And so I don't understand why you take an IP and you have to change it. Now, we're still in the early stages of this, but I have heard that, they're not going to have the exact same art style as Wendi. That's not good.
Yeah, they're probably gonna
Also, they
stick to
say
that.
the costume she had was problematic for them to animate, which is not true. That's not true. You can animate anything,
Right.
especially 3D animation,
Well, see, that's what
because you
I
make the
thought
model
was
and you
connected.
manipulate the model.
Right.
So all your initial rendering is done beforehand, and it gets easier after that. So Wendi made intricate costumes, but no more intricate than the lines on Spider-Man's costume.
Right.
So yeah.
Sounds like they're coming up with reasons to make it their thing.
Yes, and then and I got the highest respect for Wendi and Richard, and I know they're watching this because they've contacted us and told us they're going to be watching.
Hey guys.
Hey, big fans. But sometimes you get older in life, and you and I are getting older, as you can tell by our gray hairs. But we'll take Stan Sakai for instance.
Okay.
He had an opportunity with Netflix, and he realizes he's at an age where more time is behind him than he has in front of him.
Right.
And so he might have the chance to see his creation bloom and be enjoyed by millions that never had experienced it before, and gaining a popularity it never had. And so sometimes I think you take a chance when you're older on a project or in a relationship or on anything else, a business venture, because you feel like this might be it. This is my only chance. That's
I
why I think so
understand
many
that.
older people are taking advantage of it. I got a
Okay, so
friend that,
I put everything in analogies, right?
yes, you do.
Okay, so hold on to your hat. So if I had a recipe and I had tweaked it throughout the years until it was perfect, and I've brought in other people to recreate the recipe and spread it out and blah blah blah. Different people told me they were going to help me get it out there, and they lied. Even though I know I might be the last cook in the kitchen and it's getting ready to close, I would not let somebody come in and say, "Well, we want to create this,
Yes.
but we're going to change it to chocolate, or we're going to change
Right.
this, or we're going to
Right.
change the herbs and spices." You don't do that.
Well, I mean, some people have had success, financial success doing that. For instance, the guys that created Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they let anybody do whatever they want. And there's been tons of different versions
Right.
of those characters. And from a money standpoint, those two guys have made quite a good living from letting whoever wanted to do whatever with those turtles. And but ElfQuest wouldn't, ElfQuest, if Marvel had said, yes, we'll make ElfQuest, there'd be no ElfQuest today. If DC initially had said, yes, we'll make ElfQuest, there would be no ElfQuest today.
Right.
Because all those bosses and figureheads and egos and personalities would have got in there and stuck their finger in it and made it something else than it is. The fact that Wendi and Richard published that themselves kept it so pure for so long,
Right.
that it is what it is today. And I don't, it's their product. They can do whatever they want with it.
I agree.
But I do have reservations about Fox doing this. Stan Sakai will never get another chance to do Usagi. Netflix screwed it up. And anybody else, any other company that comes along is going to look and see at that Netflix show, and probably before they go back and look at the original material. And so he'll never see it. Not to say that it won't happen, but he'll never see it. And so I understand Richard and Wendi taking this shot. And I'm sure they talked it over, and I'm sure they made the best decision, and they said, you know what, let's go for it. And Matt,
I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
something could happen. I mean, it could
just
happen.
Got to the point in my life, and the older I've got, my trust in everything and everybody's gone. So
I understand. You've had a rough road to hoe
well,
the
we've all
last few
have.
years.
But here's the thing: if you all really, 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 really want to enjoy ElfQuest, dude, go to elfquest.com and
Yes.
listen to the audio movie. Holy shit, they got some great voice actors to recreate this first book. That's what I listened to.
Yeah.
And dude, there's times that it would tug at your heartstrings.
Yeah,
You get
yeah.
excited just listening,
Yeah.
not seeing anything.
I'm going to say
just
something, and
hearing
people are going to
something.
think I'm blowing smoke up Richard and Wendy's butt, but I'm not. I mean, when it comes to fantasy, I consider Tolkien's Lord of the Rings here, and right underneath it, Wendi and Richard Pini's ElfQuest.
Okay.
I put that as the second best fantasy I've read in my long, long life. And so I hope things go well with the Fox movie. I'm not optimistic, because I've been kicked in the groin too many times to
Right.
be. And so, but I hope I'm proven wrong and things go well. And but regardless of that, go to elfquest.com. If you enjoy those comics, get a physical copy. I'm
Right.
big into physical media.
Me too.
I don't like pictures on the phone only. I like them in a photo album. I don't like digital comics. I like to hold a comic in my hand. I don't want to.
He likes smelling them.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, don't be telling all my secrets. And so I like physical copies of movies. Over here, you can't see. There's a big stack of some of my favorite movies, and so I don't like necessarily just having a streaming service where I have access to them. I like albums. I like something that you can hold in your hand, a CD, when it comes to music. And so go out and buy copies of ElfQuest. You can get the Marvel stories for little or nothing. They're like $2 a piece on mycomicshop.com. And you need to read every one of them. Men love them, women love them, children love them. They're really for all ages,
Right.
in my opinion. So, I think I'm done for now.
All righty. I'm
All right, you
done.
done. All right, appreciate you watching. If you like our content, please
subscribe button
hit that
down there.
little red button down there and subscribe. And appreciate all our subscribers that have subscribed. And stay geeky, my friends. And we're done, right?
I'm done.
We're done.
We're done.
We're done.
We're done. Oh, so I forgot to mention one of my favorite lines in this book is when they're Cutter's fighting that other guy and he calls him a bone polisher.
Yes.
That is funny as
Yeah,
hell.
that's pretty good.
They kept that out of the